The senator who could single-handedly kill the Clarity Act just went on camera. She told you her price. She told you her conditions. And then at the very end of that interview, she said 7 words that almost nobody in crypto media bothered to clip. That's where we're starting today. Because while everyone's arguing about whether July 4th is realistic or whether Jamie Dimon is lying about AML provisions, and he is, we'll get into that, something else happened this week that is far more telling than any senator's interview. The biggest banks in the world just announced they're building their own blockchain settlement network. Think about what that actually means. They spent years telling you this technology was worthless. Now they're rushing to build it themselves. The question I want you sitting with for the next 15 minutes is this: why now? Welcome back. I am Dr. Evelyn Carter. We don't react to price. We don't react to headlines. We read the structure underneath them. Today, we're going to go through everything that happened this week with the Clarity Act, the real timeline, the 3 sticking points, what the banks are actually doing, and what it all means for XRP. Let's get into it. Let's start with the hard truth. Most of the conversation around the Clarity Act right now is focused on the wrong thing. Everyone is watching the clock. July 4th, August recess. Will they or won't they? That's the noise. The signal is something different. The signal is what's actually blocking the bill and whether those things can be fixed. Senator Lisa Alsobrooks, who is one of the key Democratic negotiators, went on CoinDesk this week, and she was very specific. She said she will not vote for the Clarity Act on the Senate floor unless 3 things are resolved. 1, ethics language. That's the Trump family crypto holdings, the potential conflicts of interest, the question of whether sitting presidents and their families should be able to profit from crypto assets while those same assets are being regulated. 2, illicit finance. Senator Alsobrooks is a former prosecutor. She is not going to sign off on a bill that she believes law enforcement can't work with. And 3, the Agricultural Committee version of the bill, the CFTC side, still hasn't reached a bipartisan agreement. Now, here's why that third one matters more than people realize. When the CFTC portion of this bill went through the Senate Agriculture Committee back in January, it passed 12-11. Straight down party lines. Every Republican voted yes, every Democrat voted no. That tells you there was no real negotiation, no compromises made. They ran out the clock and held a vote. Compare that to the SEC portion, which passed out of the Banking Committee with Democratic votes. Why? Because they had more time. Democrats and Republicans actually sat in a room and worked through language together. The CFTC side never got that. So now, before this thing goes to the Senate floor, they have to go back and do what they should have done in January. And then there is the Genius Act problem. The stable coin yield question, by whether crypto exchanges can pay rewards to users, was supposedly resolved during Genius Act negotiations. But there is language in the Clarity Act that either conflicts with or reopens that debate, and it needs a provision inserted that aligns the 2 bills before anyone votes. That is extra work nobody planned for. That is another week or 2 of back and forth. So let's be honest about where we are. This is not a bill that's one editorial tweak away from the floor. It is a bill that is genuinely close, with 3 legitimate obstacles that require real political work to clear. But here is the part Senator Alsobrooks said that nobody clipped. At the very end of her interview, she said, "I think we can do it." That sentence, from a Democratic senator who just listed everything wrong with the bill. That's not a throwaway line. That's someone telling you she still wants this to happen. Let me show you why getting this bill done is not optional for the institutions that are now deeply invested in making it happen. Right now, there is approximately $27 trillion locked in Nostro and Vostro accounts around the world. These are pre-funded accounts that banks hold in foreign countries just to have liquidity available for cross-border payments. That money is sitting there, doing nothing, just so transactions can settle. The entire reason those accounts exist is because international settlement is slow, fragmented, and requires pre-positioned capital. XRP operating on the XRPL eliminates that requirement. You don't need a pre-funded account in Tokyo if you can settle a transaction in 3 to 5 seconds at a fraction of a cent. Now, cross-border payments globally run at about $150 trillion a year. The Forex market processes $7.5 trillion every single day. Those are the pipes this technology is being built to run through. Here's the math that most retail investors don't sit with long enough. XRP has a fixed supply of 100 billion tokens. That's it. That's the ceiling. Of those 100 billion, roughly 55 to 57 billion are circulating. A significant portion of what Ripple holds is locked in escrow. They release about 1 billion per month, and the large majority of that gets relocked. Exchange reserves, according to CryptoQuant data, are sitting at multi-year lows. That means the tokens are moving off exchanges and into wallets that aren't selling. Think about what it takes to move even a fraction of that $7.5 trillion daily Forex volume through a liquidity bridge priced in XRP. The higher the price of XRP, the fewer tokens you need to bridge a transaction. This isn't a prediction. It is a design requirement of the system. Ripple's on-demand liquidity corridors require XRP to be priced high enough to handle large transaction volumes without slipping the market. The math points in one direction, and the math doesn't care about your timeline. Now, here's what gets interesting when you add regulatory clarity to that equation. Right now, every institution sitting on the sidelines is pricing in a risk premium. They don't know if this asset will be reclassified. They don't know if the exchange they hold it on will face regulatory action. That uncertainty has a cost. The moment the Clarity Act passes, that risk premium doesn't gradually disappear. It evaporates. Institutional gates that require a specific regulatory status before a firm can allocate. Those gates open at once. That is not a gradual repricing. That is a gap. This is not speculation. This is how regulated capital markets work. You can't allocate from a pension fund or an insurance pool to an asset with undefined regulatory status. Pass the bill and you flip a switch. Now, here's what I want you to pay attention to, because this is the part this week that most people completely buried under the senator headlines. JP Morgan, Citigroup, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo just announced they are building a tokenized deposit network. It will run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It will settle transactions immediately across blockchain technology. It is being built under a company called the Clearing House, and it launches next year. Read that again slowly. The 4 largest banks in the United States are building blockchain infrastructure. The same banks whose CEO went on television this week and said he has nothing to do with stable coins. The same banking lobby that has spent hundreds of millions of dollars fighting the Clarity Act. They are building the very technology they have spent years trying to regulate out of existence. Ask yourself what that actually means. You don't build a 24/7 blockchain settlement network without knowing what the regulatory environment is going to look like when it launches. These are not startups making a bet. These are trillion-dollar institutions that do not move without absolute legal certainty. They are not building this technology hoping clarity arrives. They already know it's coming. They're building ahead of it, so they're first to market when the switch flips. Congressman French Hill was on Fox News this week and said something I want to sit with for a second. He said, "The banks will be very competitive in this industry if consumers and businesses demand blockchain settlement." That is a sitting congressman who helped write this bill telling you on national television that the banks are coming into this space, not might come, are coming. Jamie Dimon said publicly that he will fight the Clarity Act. He said the banks will not accept it. And then while he was saying that, his institution was quietly joining a blockchain settlement consortium. I'm not telling you what to think about that. I'm just asking you to watch what people do, not what they say. This is what institutional positioning looks like from the outside. You see the public posturing, you see the lobbying dollars, and underneath it, you see the infrastructure going up. The predator doesn't roar before it moves. It positions in silence and then it strikes. So when does this actually happen? Senator Lummis gave the clearest answer we've gotten this week. She said July 4th is possible, but probably not realistic. Her actual target is before the August recess. And she walked through exactly why. They need to combine the CFTC portion with the SEC portion, layer in the ethics language. Insert the Genius Act stablecoin yield provision, and then get 60 votes for cloture on the Senate floor. That is not a 2-week job. It is a 4 to 6 week job if everyone keeps their sleeves rolled up. Her words, not mine. The White House has said publicly they want this done before July 4th. The White House crypto advisor Patrick Witt called the Clarity Act a pro-regulatory, pro-enforcement bill. That language is not accidental. They are framing this in a way that gives conservative Democrats cover to vote yes. That's political strategy. That tells you the White House is actively working the room. But here is the timeline risk nobody wants to talk about. If this bill does not pass before the November 2026 midterms and Republicans lose the House, this conversation does not resume until 2030. Senator Lummis said it herself. 4 years. That is what a missed window looks like. The work that has been done in the Senate, the months of bipartisan negotiation, the good faith compromises, the staff hours, the markup sessions, all of it goes into a drawer. And you start over in a completely different political environment. The window is not permanently open. It is open right now, and the people in that building know it. Here's the thing about waiting that most people don't calculate correctly. Exchange reserves for XRP are already at multi-year lows. The tokens leaving exchanges are not going to short-term traders. They are going to wallets that are not selling. When institutional custodians move assets into cold storage, those assets don't come back to market for a 10% gain. They come back when there's a strategic reason to sell, or they don't come back at all. We are moving from an era of abundance to an era of scarcity, slowly and then all at once. The regulatory risk premium I mentioned earlier is artificially suppressing price right now. That's actually what creates the window. The confusion, the back and forth headlines, the Jamie Dimon interviews, all of that is noise that keeps retail guessing while the infrastructure gets built underneath them. Once the bill passes, that noise disappears overnight. The institutions that have been waiting in a legal holding pattern don't gradually wade in, they allocate. They have mandates, allocation targets, and capital sitting at the gate. The retail investor who is watching senator interviews and trying to time entry based on news cycles is competing against entities that have already decided to enter. They're just waiting for the paperwork. That is an uneven competition, and you only win it by being early enough to already be positioned when the door closes. Senator Also Brooks's 20 and 21-year-old kids are into crypto because they can do math. They look at housing costs, at wages, at what traditional investment returns actually produce, and they made a calculation. That calculation is the same one a growing number of institutional allocators are quietly making. The only difference is the allocators have more capital and less time to wait for you to figure it out. I know the headlines this week feel like more of the same. Another senator saying the bill isn't ready, another banker saying he'll fight it, another timeline that slips 2 weeks to the right. I understand that. I track this every day, and even I feel the weight of it sometimes. But I want you to separate what's happening from how it feels. What's happening is a Democratic senator who could kill this bill is publicly negotiating her conditions for voting yes. That is not obstruction. That is a senator telling you her price and implying she'll take it if the price is met. What's happening is the banks that have been the loudest opponents are building blockchain infrastructure to prepare for a world where this bill passes. That is not resistance. That is capitulation dressed up as competition. Being early in any structural shift feels exactly like being wrong, right up until it doesn't. The frustration you feel right now is not a sign that the thesis is broken. It is the natural state of being positioned before consensus forms. The crowd confirms moves after they happen. That's how retail works. The informed see the structure before the move, and they hold through the noise because they understand what the noise is. The question is not whether the Clarity Act passes. The question is who is still holding when it does. Here's what I know after this week. The 3 obstacles are real, but they're all workable. The timeline is tight, but the political will is there. And the banks, the same banks spending hundreds of millions fighting this bill, are already building for the world where it passes. That tells you everything. The bill doesn't care if you're tired of waiting. The math doesn't care about your sentiment, and history, as it always has been, will not reward the people who needed more time to decide. Comment structure below if you made it to the end and you actually understand what's happening here, not the noise, the structure underneath. Stay patient, stay rational. The math doesn't lie, and the system is almost complete.